Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the latest from Ruger and Magpul, the Ruger RXM. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts, linked to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links, it will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. So this is effectively a Glock Gen 3 clone, and when it first appeared, I kind of just wrote it off as yet another Glock 3 clone. I've seen those before. And then I saw some things about it that would indicate that Magpul and Ruger had potentially improved the Glock. And most of the clones do improve it in some way, but it's usually cosmetic. They do some stippling on the frame, or they do something creative with the slide or the optics cut, things like that. But what they've done here is actually converted it into a chassis system. They call it the FCI, the Fire Control Insert. So similar to the P320 and the Echelon and some others, there's a chassis in here that is actually the firearm. And the frame and the slide and everything else effectively is just accessories. That interested me. And then as I started looking at it, I found more and more things about it that actually interested me, so I decided to get one and give it a try. Now, I have had in the past inconsistent results with Ruger's centerfire automatics. Some work great, some don't. The revolvers are awesome, and the Mark series is awesome. So I wasn't sure, but this worked. It worked from the first round, it worked to the last round, it worked like a Glock. It just worked. So I was very happy with it at the range. And I'll talk more about the overall range experience as I get into it. But to start out with, I actually do like this gun. I think there's a lot of nice things about it. So let's start with the basic stuff, just the dimensions. It's a Glock 19. 7.15 front to back, 5.31 tall. I will note that the Magpul mags that come with it, they're nice mags. They're all polymer. They don't have the metal insert that actual Glock mags have. So they do lose all of the witness holes. On a Glock mag, I've got one right here. You have individual round witness holes all the way down the body. And Glock can do that because there's the steel insert, so that gives the mag rigidity. If they drilled that many holes in this mag, the plastic would become thin and brittle here. So with the Magpul mag, you are limited to just the full mag witness hole. Not a big deal unless you like to micromanage it down to the individual round. The only other thing I noticed is, and I'll put it in the gun so you can see, if I insert the Magpul mag, it sticks out a little bit. Now, it's got a little ledge here, and there's a little cutout here, so it's easy to get a hold of it. If you insert an actual Glock mag, it's more flush. You'll see that there's more going on the base plate of the Magpul mag. So if you use an actual Glock mag, you can get it just a hair shorter. And it's 1 inch thick, so that is an improvement over the Glock. The Glocks are a little thicker, 1.2 to 1.3, depending on which generation you've got. So, like all of these clones, it's based on a Gen 3. So here is a Glock 25. This happens to be a 380. It's Glock's 380 version of the Glock 19. And it's a Gen 3. I don't think they'll ever make a Gen 4 or Gen 5 of this. So from a comparison standpoint, you can see that they're very similar. Of course, the RXM, like all of the newer ones, have a front serrations. The Gen 3s, the actual Glock Gen 3s don't. And you can see it's a little bit thicker. The shape of the slide actually makes this look thicker than it is, but the Glock's just a little bit thicker. Now, is that going to make a huge difference in carry? Probably not, because these are still just a double stack, so it's not like you're getting a Hellcat size gun here. It does have nice serrations at the front. They're easy to use. Nice serrations at the rear. A little bit of sculpting on the slide. It's kind of a nice looking slide. It has the chamber witness hole just like a Glock, and it has the takedown mechanism just like a Glock. So this comes apart just like a Glock. Not surprising, it basically is. They do have a little difference here on the mag release. It's got a little bit of scalloping and a recess in here that makes it easy to get to, and a very standard slide stop slide release. This isn't present on Glocks. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And on the other side, it does not have reversible mag release because the Gen 3s don't feature that. And one thing I did misspeak about, the witness hole is not typically found on a Glock. Glocks generally have the extractor that sticks out a little bit when it's got around in the chamber, so this adds that witness hole, which is a feature not typically found on a Glock. Two things I did fail to mention: it weighs 23.2 ounces, and also it comes in a kind of a nice case, and it has the Magpul logo on it as well as the Ruger logo. And it's a case that you could actually use as a range box, and you'll even find the Magpul logo down here. So it's definitely a collaboration between the two companies. And it's only on the one side. So one of the things you're going to find with this is Magpul is really good at making plastic things, plastic magazines, plastic whatever. And I would expect them to have the capacity to make these frames. One of the things that may happen with this gun over some of the others that have this similar concept is more availability of different types of sizes and colors of frames than some of the other manufacturers have pulled off. A lot of gun manufacturers are really good at making the guns. They're not so good at making the accessories. Magpul, that's what they do, is they make accessories, magazines, and things like that. So I think that this has a lot of promise. It does have a flatty trigger, has the inertial toggle, and the internal safeties that you become accustomed to with Glock. So let's demonstrate the trigger, because it's actually a pretty nice trigger. Very short take-up, minimal take-up, kind of a decent wall. It's kind of more Gen 5-ish feeling. It's not as harsh and sharp as a typical, like a Gen 4 Glock wall, but it is nice and crisp. Short reset. The reset's almost all the way out, but the overall travel is short enough that all the way out is still a short reset. You're right on the wall, and again, a little bit of a pull through the wall. It's a light wall, it's defined, it's easy to find, but it's not sharp. It's not a sharp wall. I wouldn't call it creepy at all. The pull through it's smooth and it's nice. I found the trigger was actually very easy to use. It did its job well at the range. So let's talk about the sights. So the front sight is a tritium sight with a ring. I really like that style front sight, really easy to find. Now, I'm not a fan of blackout sights, but what I did find with this sight is there's enough of a gap that I could find a piece of the target to reference. And despite being a blackout sight, I could actually shoot this very well, doing bullseye type shooting. A lot of people are fond of the blackout rear sights for quick acquisition, but it's a little harder to do those little tight groups that you do when you're doing that style of shooting. I found this would be a happy balance. I would have liked to have either a 3-dot or a U-dot, but I did find that this sight worked well, and they are metal. So they're metal sights, one of the things people don't like about Glocks. It is optics ready, and you take this plate off. But there are no plates that you need to buy. It uses a pin system similar to the new Springfield. It doesn't have quite the diversity of options. There's not as many settings for the pins to do quite the diversity of optics that the Springfield does. But it does do the RMSC, the RMS, and the Delta Point Pro format. So there are a few optics that, there's actually quite a few optics. I said RMS, I meant to say RMR. There are quite a few optics out there that follow that pattern, so there's a lot of optics available. One of the things I want to talk about is removing the chassis. So on this, there's a lot of stuff you have to do. You have to pop this pin out, you have to take this out, you have to take this out. There's a couple springs in there that can get loose, so you have to pay attention to it. So it's not quite as easy as some of them where you just take the takedown pin out and it goes. There's a little more to it to taking the chassis out. Unfortunately, it does require tools. There's a pin that you need like a Glock punch to do this. And things get sketchy with their rules when it comes as soon as you whip out tools. So I'm not going to take the chassis out of here because I don't want to run afoul of some of their rules when you start doing that type of work. YouTube just kind of gets a little sketchy when it comes to that, so we're going to refrain from that. However, I can take it apart and show you the internals. So just like a Glock, you clear it, pull the trigger, kind of give it a little squeeze, pull down these two tabs, and it comes right apart. And here's that chassis. And what you're going to notice is different from a Glock is there's a metal frame all the way around it, both sides. Those springs that I referenced are under here. When you take the chassis out, those springs can get loose. A lot of it looks like a Glock if you ignore those rails. It's got even a very similar Glock fire control group. And actually at the back of here, when the chassis is out, you actually see the insert that, the typical Glock sear insert is inside of this chassis. But with this chassis system, that gives a lot of flexibility that Glocks don't have. One of the flexibilities also is that the frame plays less of a part in the overall rigidity of it. You'll see the frame's actually quite thin here, and it can be thin here because it doesn't need to be super strong to hold the gun together. That's what this frame does. That opens up possibilities for thinner guns, thinner frames, different, all sorts of things. Single wafer style recoil spring. Very typical Glock style barrel with one exception, well, two exceptions. One, it has the cutout, has a very Glock-like ramp, and this particular one is conventional rifling. Now, there's kind of three camps with conventional rifling versus polygonal. Some people really prefer the polygonal that Glocks and some others have because you get a little bit more consistency and a little bit better pressure. Other people hate that because you're kind of restricted from running cast bullets, so you can run reloads in this, and some people simply don't care. I'm not surprised it's conventional. Ruger has all the machining to do conventional. They don't do any polygonals. They'd have to buy a lot of machining to make polygonal barrels, so I'm not surprised it's conventional. And to me, it's not a big deal. It's well machined, it's clean, it's well done, and I think it'll work every bit as well as the actual polygonal Glock barrels. I'll set the barrel aside and then show you the internals of the slide, and you'll find that it looks very Glock-like. Not surprising. Sear, drop safety plunger. Of course, it's round like the prior versions of the Glock. It doesn't have the oblong setup. Everything else in here looks very, very familiar if you're used to Glocks. It's well machined, it's well done. Ruger does do good machining, and they do have good equipment. Reassembly is relatively easy. Just put it back together, kind of make sure that this is centered, line it up, and you're back in business. Very easy to live with and easy to put together. So I kind of touched on various aspects of its function. It worked flawlessly. I found it very easy to shoot while, by the way, it does have a single slot Glock style rail, so any of the accessories that are out there should work on it. It has an undercut on the trigger here. So there's an undercut on the trigger and a little bit of a recess. It doesn't have the finger grooves that the Gen 3 Glocks have. Now the undercut's kind of small, so if you've got tiny little fingers, your finger might fully fit into that undercut. Bigger fingers may not. And of course it has a deep beaver tail, so very low risk of getting slide bit by this. Overall, I found it to be a pleasant gun to shoot, a reliable gun to shoot. At an MSRP of $499, you're actually getting quite a lot of features for less than what an equivalent Glock would cost. And I really like it. I think the Magpul and Ruger did a good job with it. The other thing I'll note is, unsurprisingly, it worked flawlessly with a regular Glock mag. It comes with two of these 15-round Magpul mags, but it will work with any mag that'll fit in a Glock. So 17 and on up are available, just like if it were a Glock 19. One last note, they call this stealth gray, that's the color of the frame. The slide and barrel are black nitride, so overall well done. I think you probably can't go wrong with this. This looks like a good choice. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Play, or Rumble. We're pretty much everywhere. And thank you.